converted anyone to religion yet? Not one of them, but just all of them. I hope so. Students often ask me which one do I believe, and I tell them all of them. And they, how's that, Powell? They disagree. They don't really didn't have to disagree. Now, I've covered maybe too much, and I didn't have as many clips or interactive dialogues as I'd like, so I apologize for that part of this presentation. But it's nice for me to review the whole class in such a short period, too. And this is part of the proof that you could believe all of them. And I like to say there's a baby in every religious bathtub, and the key is taking the baby out of the bath water. They all have bath water, trust me. I don't have time to go into all the bath water, but I do want to touch base with Chinese religion and some of its interesting features. I like to say about the Chinese religions, there is little to say, but much to do. So if I were going into Taoism, what I would really be discussing more deeply are Tai Chi exercises. Perhaps we've seen Chinese doing these kind of motions in parks and the like. Or with Confucianism, it would be the vast number of politeness rituals that Confucian scholars perform, as well as the vast number of theories of law and government. So in China, we call it the land of three religions. And what we see here are Buddha, Lao Tzu, and Confucius, or Confuzi, looking at the river of life. And what's interesting is that in, for instance, Japan, when they do religious surveys, polls, they find that the Japanese stack up to more than 100% belief in these three traditions. Are you Taoist? Yes. Are you Confucian? Of course. Are you Shinto? I was, they're consecrated in Shinto shrines as babies. And are you Buddhist? Who wouldn't be Buddhist? So they get more than 100% adherence rate. So our way of understanding religion as you're Jewish or you're Christian or you're Muslim doesn't play out in East Asia. So let's just take a look briefly at a few of these. The Vinegar Tasters is a famous Chinese painting where we can see Confucius and the Buddha tasting the vinegar of life and saying it is sour, or for Confucius, it is bitter. But Lao Tzu says the vinegar of life, all the bad things as well as the good things that happen to someone, are sweet. And so we have a very different religious setup in China. On your left is what is known as the Tai Chi. I mentioned it in the past, and we don't call it the yin-yang, but Tai Chi is better, and certainly not the yin-yang. And of course, this represents male and female energies, and it is a monistic religion, as we discussed those things the first day. To your right is the symbol of Confucianism. These two are opposites, and yet you can be both at the same time. The Confucian symbol represents a central river with tributaries feeding into it. The central river is the emperor or the head of the society, and your job is to do your job to feed into the main river of society. So we really have two very different traditions, and yet as one Chinese scholar I knew, he said, my mind is Confucian, but my body is Taoist. So Confucianism looks at society, Taoism looks to nature, and while they seem to conflict, you can integrate them both into a Chinese life. In fact, the Chinese like to say, you're born Taoist, you live your life Confucian, and you die a Buddhist. So there are several ways to think about that, and for Chinese as well, like Yudong Lin or Lin Yudong. He's a Christian, but he says, well, why does that mean I can't be Confucian and practice the politeness rituals anymore? And why do I have to believe Greek theology about Christ? Well, why can't I just accept his sacrificial love as a Jewish teacher? And so here's Confucius. He says, and this is where it's very strange, we think of religion as belief in a higher power or God, but for Confucius, he says, and this is his famous quote, I speak not of divine things, but human things. And who is a priest of Confucianism? You are looking at him right here. All teachers are considered, and government officials are priests of Confucian tradition. And they don't call it Confucianism. That's something that we as a largely Christian society, we tend to impute, like Buddhism, they call it the middle way, in fact. Not Confucianism, but the school of the scholars. So, we have a tradition that we could call academia, which you can imagine someone like me likes the idea that there is a religion for me, and it is this one. Do your job and all will be well. For Confucius, kids who are equals to parents, does anyone know a family where the kids actually run the show? We've seen that, haven't we? I was such a kid, kind of, actually. Dad wanted a democratic family, and that meant I broke the tie between him and Mom, which means we always spent more money than he wanted. For Confucius, if we don't obey our superiors who are rightly guiding us, now we can disobey, even overthrow a government that is tyrannical, that's fine with him, or a parent who's abusive. But if we have rightly guiding parents, we owe them strict obedience, and the kid has to do his job. And so often people think so wrongly in this culture of the Islamic world as a threat to American values. And we all remember the day, my youngsters don't, when the Soviet Union was the big nemesis, and atheism was the threat to the planet and our way of life. And now, a mere few decades later, strongly theistic people who believe in Jesus as a prophet, and, excuse me, this is getting feedback. Let's see. Hello? Okay. Let's do that. Is that, I'm still audible? Yes. Okay. So we tend to think of these theists who believe in Jesus as a prophet as the big threat now. And in fact, the threat to American values, if we want to see it that way, I don't, but it is this tradition of Confucianism. If we don't know it, China's no longer really a communist country. It's reverted back since Deng Xiaoping to Confucian values of hard work, obey authorities, do your job, and all will be well. So, if we really wanted to see a threat, it's what I call the invisible religions of China, not the Islamic world. They want what our fundamentalists want. A theocracy, don't they? I find it astonishing that this would be the case, being raised to fear the Soviet atheists for so long. This is the model of Confucian religion. Confucian people say, Powell, this is not a religion. But in my field, we know it's impossible to not be religious. We found it in our DNA, in our temporal lobes, our societies and rituals, the handshake alone, things like this are all religious, how we install presidents with priests, ministers, rabbis, offering prayers. So you can run, but you can't hide from religion. And so basically, Confucianism, like Hinduism, is a very family-focused religion. We saw Buddhism. Buddha thought the family, the source of 1,000 sorrows. Does that ring true? No, we don't like that. And for Confucius, the family were concentric golden rings spreading throughout society, without which society cannot function. So I would say a Confucian guy, but not a Buddhist guy, could possibly run for president in our country with those values. And what is the goal for a Confucian person? It isn't heaven or a better rebirth. It is to be the perfect moral gentleman. Sorry, ladies, it is patriarchal. You are lower down than your husbands in the Confucian 5 relationships. But nevertheless, in modern times, perhaps women now can be gentle women. And Lao Tzu, on the other hand, takes the opposite view. There's even a legendary debate between Lao Tzu and Confucius. Essentially, Confucius says, if moral people do not struggle against chaos, chaos will reign. Lao Tzu's point of view is quite the opposite. Lao Tzu of Taoism says actually individuals exist, not societies. Chaos and greed will always exist, and he says to Confucius, no matter how you struggle, you will not overcome chaos. And the best thing to do is to retreat to the woods and merge with nature. At the end of the debate, you suppose they castigate each other. You're wrong, Lao Tzu. You know, and I will oppose you at every step. No, they don't. They agree in the end that they're not going to agree, and then they let each live and let live. Is the end of their debate. So for Lao Tzu, the 5 colors blind the eye. The sage is guided by feeling, not by seeing. He lets go of that and chooses this. Means we let go of our careers, of politics, social strife, and we focus within on our own problems. And how are we saved in Lao Tzu? Essentially, well, in a general way, this man is exemplifying Taoist practice. That's why I say there's much to do, but little to say. In the Chinese religions, we would be practicing these Tai Chi moves. And the goal of these Tai Chi moves is a perfect flow and harmony with the universe. So rather than society, it is nature for Lao Tzu. And we can see in this one image how a Buddhist monk and a Taoist master coexist in Buddhist society. And what is interesting about this image, I usually have students look at them for a little while and ask them, where's the Confucian element in these two guys? And it is in their faces. Think of the Dalai Lama or Tibetan lamas or other Buddhist monks who are not Chinese Buddhist monks, and their faces. And I think we all know the Dalai Lama is famous for these big smiles. I can't even do them because I don't feel them. I'm a little more sympathetic to this reserved Buddhist monk and Confucian values. And that is part of the politeness ritual of Confucius.